Far from being a new idea, values education, values encouragement has long been part of school practice. What is new is that we now have them stated as a curriculum dimension and as a curriculum requirement. The requirement is not to teach students values. It is highly questionable about whether you can actually teach values. It's a much better advised notion of the school's responsibility. The requirement for schools is that they encourage the values, that they help students to explore the values, what they mean for them in their day-to-day life, and that the values are modelled within the school. That means that they'll be evident in the school's practices, in the life of the school, in its philosophy, in the relationships amongst people within the school. It's not just something that we do to students, it is something that has to be lived together. I sometimes find it useful to empower teachers' sense of their own worth of their thinking and their knowledge base and their experience by following an approach like this. I say to them, tell the person next to you what your definition of values would be. Then after that I show them some definitions that are provided by academics or writers or people who specialise in the field. Now the delightful thing about this, that I've found so many times around New Zealand, is that when I ask teachers, well, how close was your definition to the definitions I've shown you? They invariably say to me, we're saying the same things. Why is that empowering for teachers? Because it strengthens their own sense of knowledge, it values their practice, it gives them that sort of sense of professionalism, rather than always starting the other way around and saying, well, this is what so-and-so says values are. The values that we have in the New Zealand curriculum are stated as not being an exhaustive list. If you ask a community what the important values are that they would hold or subscribe to, not too many communities or parents or people would say words like ecological sustainability or diversity or equity. We need to think about that, because the power of practice comes from meaning that people take from words and, moreover, from what they currently value and understand. So that is one of the challenges in education, is to begin from where people are at and then to advance them in terms of the scope of their thinking and their ambition. The Australians got their statement of values out before New Zealand, so sometimes we're beaten by Australia, but never mind. It's interesting to compare the list of values in the Australian curriculum to those that are in our curriculum. And there are some very observable distinctions between the two sets. That is a nice thing to talk about amongst your staff when you're clarifying what values are and what their meaning is in your school. The question is often raised, should we simply be working to the statement of values that are in the New Zealand curriculum? Well, we need to go back to that third point in the direction of this revised curriculum, and that is school ownership. And school ownership means your obligation is to be consistent with the general intent of the curriculum, and yet in doing that you've got permission to identify what the priorities are for your community, for your students, for your place. Now, how might a school go about identifying values? Well, there are different methods. I read in a newsletter from a Wellington secondary school where the principal asked the guidance counsellor to state what the values should be for the whole school, and the guidance counsellor took them from C.S. Lewis. Well, I don't know if I support that particular method. Not a lot of engagement going on there in arriving what the values are. Not a great deal of ownership. A line method, if you like. Well, perhaps a more worthwhile method might be to attempt to engage those who actually do have an influence on the development of young people's values. And who are they? Well, the home, without doubt, is one of the most powerful points of influence. So if you can engage the parents, the whānau, in identifying what are the important values for a school, let alone the important values in their own home, own family, then you're taking a big step towards developing a statement of values that is likely to have widespread support and understanding. That's not consultation, that's engagement. Here is a tip for you on a slide that shows the values that were developed by Mount Cook School in Wellington. Now, what typically happens when people start to sit around in groups to identify what the values are that they'd wish to model, explore and encourage is that we get long lists. And long lists elude cognitive portability, being able to hold it in your head. You've got to keep going back to the list, ticking things off. Now, Mount Cook School has been quite clever. Yes, they did have lists initially, but then they, in developing their lists, in seeking out the priorities, they found that essentially there were 4 major value areas that they wanted to emphasise: excellence, respect, friendship and integrity. Now you'll notice that there's one there, one dimension, that's not in the national curriculum: friendship, kindness, compassion, good humour. Now this is a school exercising its own views, its own priorities, and that is a very legitimate part of designing and developing the school's curriculum and practice. And what they've done within each of those 4 key points is listed some of the aspects or some of the sub-values, if you like, that actually all contribute to that bigger picture view of the value. I spoke with a principal who told me that they'd spent a lot of time in their community talking about values because there were some issues in this community and the community and the school needed to work together. He told me that they arrived after a lot of discussion at 2 major values that everybody was going to endeavour to support and work to, and they were respect and responsibility. The principal asked me, well, now that we've got this national curriculum with its 7 values, does that mean that ours are no longer applicable? Far from it. I mean, those 2 values have got instant cognitive portability. You're going to be able to carry those 2 values around in your head without any problem at all. You're going to be able to talk about them, refer to them. But more to the point is the requirement is to be consistent with the national curriculum and how you're going about exploring and modelling values. So if we look at the values in the national curriculum document and start to sort of draw some lines from the school's 2 high point values into the curriculum document's values, you can see that they are interrelated all the way. Take, for example, ecological sustainability. It invariably invokes a strong sense of both respect and responsibility. So in effect, the national curriculum values for this school become contexts through which its 2 priority values are explored, modelled and encouraged. Many schools are identifying values in a way that actually gives them a sense of belonging, ownership, meaning for their school. You could say, well, School A has ended up with the same values as School B. That doesn't matter. You're not working in School B, you're working in School A. You're with the children in School A. What they do down the road is fine, but your influence is within your own school. So there is no sort of, there's no premium on which set of values necessarily are those that are the top ones of the list. But what typically I see in schools is they've identified the key values. In this school here, it's respect, honesty and perseverance. Those are their priorities. And in every classroom, the children say, well, what does this mean for us? At this school, Karori Normal School in Wellington, they went through a detailed process, which I might say everybody found very satisfying, of engaging children with their parents and identifying what their values, priority values might be in the home and in the school. The children all brought them back to school. In their classrooms, they looked at the different ideas that came from different homes. This is engagement, remember. And then they ended up with a list of, in their school, 5 key values from that whole process. And again, they examined how they relate across to the national curriculum values. Moreover, in the classrooms, teachers asked children to do things like saying, well, what does respect look like? What does it feel like? So already they're embarking on curricular practice. Many schools include their values in their school charter, as well as in their school's curriculum documentation. This is another case in point where there's a nice bridging point between the school's constitutional legal document that binds the Board of Trustees with the state and its curriculum action. I think it's rather commendable to see a school's charter having the same values as those that are articulated for the students and the teachers to be living in their school.